Hello, this is episode 6 of the Philosophical Rambler podcast. Today I am with Felipe Dinis. So, Felipe, how are you today, my friend?
Yeah, good. How about you?
I'm very good. Felipe, we've talked a couple of times now, and actually earlier today we had a little conversation. But very briefly, just to introduce to the listeners or the viewers right now, what is your main area of interest? What is it that you really like to think about, and what are your concerns at the moment?
I think from my side, it's more of a philosophical, spiritual inquiry of the problems in Western civilization. So that's more my focus. It's still quite a broad sweep. There's still elements of psychology I dabble into as well, but it's more of a bigger macro outlook in terms of diagnosing spiritual problems in the West and actually seeking for solutions. So it's not simply saying, oh, this is bad, but it's more focusing on what can we do to improve our civilization. So, which obviously it can be difficult, but that's what I broadly focus on.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you were talking about the micro versus the macro earlier as a general precept. And, people generally do incline to think more bigger picture or more detail orientated. You can see this express itself within psychology, within personality traits. You could probably define it as one of the big five: conscientiousness versus openness, right? I'm the same. I tend to be much higher in openness than I am conscientiousness, to my deficit sometimes. People who are generally creative, we tend to see a lot, but being active in that sphere, not just seeing a lot, but actually putting what you're seeing into action is never an easy thing to do, because it requires organization, details, all that kind of stuff, right?
Absolutely.
So we're seeing such massive vision at the moment. A lot of us can see the vision, some people cannot. Some people are truly blind to what's happening in the world right now, spiritually speaking. But for those of us who can see the decline happening and the spiritual absence we're seeing, the question must be asked, well, what can we do about it? How do we bring back some sort of backbone, some structural integrity to our civilization? And I don't think that's going to be a problem solved overnight, is it?
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
But what are some of the things as a society do you reckon that we can do? I mean, because the fragmentation of the church is clearly obvious. There's,
yes.
Christians arguing with Christians. Every religion itself has its divisions, but
Absolutely.
It seems to be in England we can't even come together under any one thing at the moment, and that is what's causing all these issues to some extent, I would say.
Absolutely, George. No, I agree, and I think it's understanding our history, not just obviously in the United Kingdom, but we're talking Europe. We need to understand the history of Europe, which is obviously the house of Christendom. And without understanding history, how can we move forward to create a better future? And these are the questions that I'm sure you think about, I think about, many of us think about, And I think when we look at the underpinnings of the West, we just can't run away from Christianity. Now, when we... because you mentioned in terms of the fragmentation of even different Christians in England, in this country, and it's a shame, more division doesn't create more unity, cliche, but true. But we have to acknowledge there are, not to contradict what you're saying, but we have to acknowledge there are, how can we say it? Distinction doesn't necessarily mean automatically, war. Distinction means maybe people are seeking for truth. We can't get diluted by the sense of trying to unite things all together. That's what you mentioned earlier in the conversation, George, about the symbol Baphomet. That symbol is a symbol of modernity par excellence. That's the symbol, and the dissolution of boundaries and this so-called false unity is the problem in itself. So there's nothing wrong with for a Christian to say, look, I'm a Catholic, I'm an Orthodox Christian, I'm an Oriental Orthodox, I'm a Protestant, I'm a born-again Christian, you name it. There's nothing wrong with those distinctions, but we have to understand that there's bigger battles in play, and I think, especially Christians, we should be uniting towards a bigger cause, and maybe that's part of the problem, I guess, not getting that unity in order, but yeah.
But it's funny, isn't it? Because obviously, you're even seeing, the old phrase comes to mind: "The enemy of my enemy is my friend." And it's
Absolutely.
funny, isn't it, how certain religions coming together, at least in a quasi surface level way, at least in joke and jest.
Yeah.
You've commonly seen this partnership between Muslims and Christians. Actually have a lot of similarities, of course. Naturally, they both believe in Christ. Just one doesn't believe Christ is God incarnate, but one believes he's a messianic figure, Islam, and we believe he is both the Messiah and God incarnate in human form. That seems to me the crux of the distinction there between the two religions. But regardless, it seems to me at the moment that the two religions both agree that there is a greater threat, and that is this greater threat of the body of modernity and the spirit that has become of it, whether you want to call that Baphomet, something of akin to a satanic image. Regardless, it is demonic in some way, and people with religious temperaments seem to recognize this common threat, and they're like, right, well, we might have our differences, but there's a bigger threat out here, and at least we both believe in God, and we believe in the highest form of God. What exactly that means is going to differ, and it's a bit of a blurry line, because obviously how can you believe in God which is Christ? But there's definitely connection there regardless in spirit, and I think the only real way that this psychosis can be cured is by giving people the plot, because if you haven't got a plot and you've lost the plot, you won't know how to order yourself in reality, and you won't know how to understand who you are. You won't understand the very nature of yourself and everything, because you have no compass, and you don't understand what it is inside of your soul. You don't understand the depths of who you are. And I think the only way to understand that is these great great bastions of belief. The Christian story and narrative is grounded in so much depth that we can see express itself in highs and lows. It makes you very grounded to, I think, what things really are, and the goals of your life and collective goals of our collective dream. I think without that, the snake of the inside is going to poke its head up into the world of consciousness. And the question is, of those who say they do not believe, is what do they believe? Because everybody believes something, whether they know or not.
Yeah.
And the image is something which could be akin to something of Baphomet's. This multi-sexed organism, which is somewhat of what is above and is below, but it's almost manifested in the form of flesh.
Yes.
So whilst we may say that God is of a complete harmony of all things, the up and down, the yin yang, it seems to be something akin to when this image is of material flesh and is both sexes, it is of a perverted order, because nothing in this earthly manner can be both simultaneously, because we live in this fragmented earthly plane of our dimensions. The only way you can truly achieve symbiosis is becoming God, and God is not of this earth, and that's why it was such a phenomena when he came together in the form of Christ, which is the only example of when you can combine both forces. It doesn't work anything else. If that makes sense.
Yes, no, I do agree. I was literally thinking, because I've got a book here from Harari, and he's been one of the political, ideological talking heads of the elites. Let's call it the elites. And
it's true.
Don't forget don't forget his ideology is obviously a transhumanist ideology. It's an atheistic, materialist ideology. And I had to, because I read this book 5 years ago now, and I just thought, let me skim through this book again and remember what he said. And because he has this materialist outlook, it's always focused on the utility of things. It's always the utility. What does the goods? What can it achieve? Religion. What's it good for? And he will admit, religion. Morally, it helps people. It puts some order, but his outlook, you mentioned about, even the unconscious, and he's a man that is very one-dimensional. He's the personification of Ian McGilchrist's left hemispheric perspective onto the world. And his paradigm is what influences modernity, this sense of, like you just discussed, the lack of the sacred principle, And I'm bringing this book because this is actually a really important book if you want to understand even the transhumanist perspective, because the dissolution of boundaries. Don't forget the spiritual warfare. You mentioned about how religious minded people are trying to unite in some sort of way, because doesn't matter about the differences. There is a bigger danger at work, and it is this sense of, look, forget about humanity now. in universal history, this wouldn't have been, as far as we're aware, this wouldn't have been a problem. But we're facing this technological takeover, this technocratic, we can call it, from their eyes, a technocratic paradiso. You know, it's the idea of instead of thinking of this spiritual resurrection, there's this material resurrection. These guys are focused on the material resurrection, you know, and some of these elites are trying to freeze their bodies in specific chambers. And this is where it gets crazy, in a sense of, even though they claim they're not religious, why would you think of even the material resurrection, for example? Why would you even freeze? Yes. There's this dilution of boundaries, but because they've so atomized their outlook, it's like you're denying spiritual principles, you know?
It's true. And actually, if I can just interject here, that brings me on to, recently, I believe it is, who is it? It's not Jonathan Pajot, it's his brother, I believe, Matthew.
Oh, Matthew Pajot.
He's Matthew, French Canadian, I believe, right?
I forgot.
He is very of the same lines of his brother, and he talks a lot about 666, and what Antichrist is, and what's the definition of 666, and it's something akin to what you were describing.
That's his book.
Quality's not great, I can't see it. But yeah, okay, interesting, nice.
That's one of his books, Matthew Pajot.
Matthew Pajot. He tweeted recently about 666, and his brother talked a lot about this. I saw one of Jonathan's videos, and he sort of dissected it. I just find it fascinating how numbers and numerology has actual such basis in theology. And what you speak about the man-made renewal rather than a natural spiritual resurrection. 666 is almost a man-made renewal, right? So rather than renewing by the natural order of God, the kingdom of heaven, you're forcing a resurrection through material. So as you said, rather than letting yourself die, oh no, I'm going to renew myself in the flesh, like a zombie, freezing myself, you know. Classic transhumanism, classic 666 behaviour, you know, classic Antichrist behaviour. And this is what we're going to start to see more of, is if you do truly believe in Antichrist, and you truly believe in the revelations, and you truly believe that the times are closing in when this phenomena is going to play out, this great drama is going to play out, maybe you could say, oh, well, every generation has thought that this is going to be the case. Every generation has thought they're the last man. But if you look at history now and you compare it to the past, it's hard to sort of see how this isn't another level, what we're seeing right now, in terms of the technological advancements, in terms of this kind of energy we haven't really experienced before. We've had leaders who have been Antichrist in the way they rule with their energy, but not with the level of technology, not on the scale that we're seeing today. This is why it feels so epic in nature, and this is why I think it is the time that the Antichrist beast system is starting to get its paws in everything, because it's just simply the scale. It's the whole world. It's not just countries. It's not just Rome. It's not just Greece. It's not just China. It's the whole world. You know, this is globalism. And this is why I think it stinks of Mark of the Beast behaviour.
Absolutely.
And, you know, and I think realistically, you either admit that it's very likely, or you say that's ridiculous. But to be honest with you, it's almost thinking, if this is prophecy, is there anything as we can do as believers to combat it, or all we can do is submit to it and just spread truth? What will happen, but surely if we are to believe that this will end ultimately in the return of Christ, then we simply just pave the way.
Yes, and I think you can't be egoic in this process, you know, because obviously that contradicts the lack of, you know, it contradicts humility. It contradicts the fact that you must be humble throughout this process. We can't be egoic. We can't think we're going to change the world. There's no way. If we think along those lines, we're going to probably get into the trappings of the material confusion. And so we need to, this is my outlook, cathedral builds, you know, how the beautiful cathedrals laced around Europe, they took beyond the lifetime of many of these artisans. So they never even saw these beautiful creations erected. So we need to think along the lines psychologically of cathedral building, you know. Some of these characters, again, these transhumanism is not a thing that's just come out the last 4 years since, you know, the lockdown, since 2020. This is a pattern that's occurred in distortions of Christianity. When you think of the Gnostic escape, Gnosticism is not just if you have a very new age perspective, you think, oh, Gnostics were unfortunately deemed as heretics by mainstream Christians. But if you understand their worldview is based on, this is the matrix, this is a prison, and the God that controls this world is the demiurge. And when you have a worldview like that, you'll do anything to escape this world. And you have to think, this we're talking, the Gnostic Christians 1,800, 1,700 years ago, and obviously closer times. This paradigm is actually, ironically, landed in the lap of these so-called atheist transhumanists. But I would actually argue they're religious, but they don't, I can't believe it sounds like a Jordan Peterson thing, but they're religious and they don't even know it, because they are following this Gnostic kind of worldview. Look, this world is like truly fallen. There's no benevolent God here. This is a demiurge God. We have to escape. And when we think of even Elon Musk is seen as one of the good guys. Elon Musk is seen as someone that will help humanity. And don't get me wrong, he's doing a lot of good in terms of freedom of speech. That's amazing for us. So props to him. But I mean, when we're really honest about the idea of Neuralink and his product telepathy, think of the raw power of telepathy. That's like, this is, if you heard of Warhammer 40,000, that game, the what's it called? I don't know if you've heard of Warhammer 40,000, but anyways, it makes me think of dreadnoughts. Yeah. It makes me think of dreadnoughts and avatars of war. There's so much, there's so much power and a lack of wisdom in this situation right now, and that's where it feels very prophetic, very end times, like you said, George. This is not just. Throughout history, people saying these are the end times now. It's like, no, in terms of the technological power and might, there's no comparison in recorded history. There's nothing like it. And so we have to just be wary of the pattern. And if you don't have a religious mindset, don't see this completely literally. See this very symbolically. See this very much as a pattern. See this very much as when you go to bed at night, you have dreams. These are symbols that tell you something about you and your humanity. And so that's another way for people that are not Christian or not even religious to understand this is a pattern, nothing more. And it could be something grand if there's an unveiling, let's say, but we don't know. I'm not arrogant enough to say exactly what's going to happen. I don't know, but I just know this is a pattern, and that's it.
Yeah, so fascinating stuff, Philippe, and definitely this archetype of the demiurge. It's we see this pop up in lots of different religions in different ways, and actually it connects a lot to Jewish theology as well. And also Greek with Saturn. If you look at the matrix as an archetype here is definitely what's pronounced, and matrix and mother are actually the root word from mother comes from matrix, and vice versa. The Latin roots are simply matter, or matter, whilst the fatherly is more of pater, pattern, right? So the fundamentals here is very clear. So the demiurge, being a snake-like, devouring world snake, is if it's something akin to what I write about in my book, The Black Cube. It's this cube, it's this hexagon. A cube, a three-dimensional representation of a cube is hexagon essentially. And if you look, it's funny, if you look on top of Saturn, there's a gas, there's a big formation of a hexagon. It's the sixth planet from the sun. I find that quite interesting as well. But how I saw it is, if you simply see our world as something of trapped in within a great matrix, and if you view the matrix as a grand simulation, so simulation theory is incredibly popular.
Yes.
So it wouldn't completely be off the books to sort of suggest eventually we'll have the technology and the means to create new realities within our own reality. And it's like the Russian dolls. It's like then eventually they will go on. If we literally just put the parameters into a virtual universe, let it run out its course, because the parameters we project into it are going to be the same ones from ours. So funnily enough, it's going to be a mimicked version of our reality, if not exactly the same. Evolution will play out the same way. Humans will form again, and the loop continues. The beginning is the end. Another layer to the demiurge system matrix has been added. Now, if you simply have an inclination and you sort of start to grasp this vision of this demiurgical kind of matrix layered infinite reality we're trapped in, this massive hypercube box of layers upon layers of realities all crossed upon each other. Without God, that's utterly devastating to your soul.
Yes.
If you don't have anything that exists outside the demiurge, if that is literally this great matrix, that's life. We just got to kill ourselves, or we just got to bring everyone down. The whole thing's a waste of time. We're trapped. We're being trapped by this great serpentine beast. Everything's shit. That will corrupt you. The only way to not be corrupted by that, even if you don't realize that vision has entangled within your unconscious, you need some light involved in that darkness to balance it out. And the only way you can access that is by knowing that in the beginning there was something other than that, right? In the beginning there was light. So regardless, what was the first simulation? It had to be the first one. If you believe in simulation theory, well, what was the first one? What was before that, right? Okay, so look at it like that potentially. Okay, and outside of this great box, that there is your savior. That there is your God, the greatest, the King of Kings. You know, once you have an understanding, or at least a faith in an image that transcends everything in your wildest imagination, demiurge, simulation theory, matrix, then your soul can actually be full of love. Because without that connection, that you just have a relation to this matrix kind of prison cube, essentially.
Yes, absolutely.
Essentially, the Star of David essentially is a prison cube. It's they know they're trapped and they're waiting for their Messiah to rescue from this prison cube. How can you not be driven to resentment, madness, and all kinds of other perversion? It corrupts your soul.
Yeah, it's ironically, it's a fear-based system. You have obviously famous conspiratorial characters like David Icke promoting a very Gnostic worldview. In reality,
very much
it is.
So.
Yeah, and in reality, when you lay it out like that, it is a very fearful based system. And how many times have you heard, Christians are based on fear? Look, there's billions of Christians on this planet, for example. And so if there's billions of Christians, obviously there will be people that will be operating in fear. But that's not the Christ message. That never was the Christ message, So it's a weird... Because these are all worldviews and paradigms at the end, And what is your worldview? What is your God? What do you idolize? And that's what you have to be aware. So in modernity, it's like, no, going back to the transhumanists, they're not atheists. They believe in something. You must believe in something.
Yeah.
Of
course they do.
An atheist does believe in something. Of course they do.
Of course they believe in something.
Yeah.
And I think that these people, if you could truly look into someone's unconscious mind, you would see the symbolic representations of demiurgical kind of style, matrix. It would be rooted in their own expression in relation to this pattern, because that's all they are. There are patterns of viewing, and they're broad ways of viewing things. Whether the details of these broad analysis aren't exactly that, it's going to be something of that general style. You believe it's a turtle on a turtle's back. You believe it's a machine inside a machine inside a machine. It doesn't actually matter. But what does matter is the overall overarching archetypal pattern is the same, and the way it expresses inside of them, that will be what really has captured them. And it is, you're right, your submission through the fear of this, and not the fear of God itself. Because you can be fearful of something, you can also love something, but you can also be fearful of something and not love it as well. And you need that duality there to really capture the true wholeness, to give you wholeness. Right?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, just going back to the history point of view, so I mentioned in terms of the Gnostics, obviously Gnosticism's been around for a very long time, but then we have to understand how, our worldview hasn't just come out of a vacuum. It started from somewhere. You can look at the Renaissance, you can look at the Protestant Reformation, you can look at the French Revolution, you can look at the promotion of Karl Marx, for example, and the destruction of Tsar's Russia, the Romanovs, into the Soviet Union. You've got all these movements, and what they are is just different ideologies that are actually, in some ways, rejecting the sacred. They're just like, see you later, sacred. We can become gods. We don't need you, sacred. And obviously, that's a one-dimensional analysis from myself. But from what I'm trying to say from my side, it is because when we look at this, what we talked about earlier, didn't we, George? We talked about sacred hierarchies, and we talked about the oldest metaphysic, or the oldest religion is Hinduism, and it doesn't have this egalitarian equality kind of perspective that the New Agers like to promote and the progressive types like to promote. It actually has a very strict hierarchy in terms of what is your sacred place in this world. The Brahmin class at the top, the priestly class, they're right at the top. They're the ones that are connected to the absolute. And then we have secondary, this warrior, this kingly class, and them two need to be operating in tandem, because the kingly and warrior class need to be ordered in the right way with the spiritual principle. Now, once they think they can become better than this spiritual principle. And this was my hypothesis with the Pope in Western Christendom. I feel like that's where it possibly might stem. The idea the Pope wanted absolute authority beyond the patriarchal model in Eastern Europe. And it became like the absolute. That's when people started rebelling against the Pope, and that's where we start to see the inklings of the rebellion against sacred authority the last 500-600 years, for example. So that would be the diagnosis from my side. Now, what do we do with that information? Well, again, if it took that long, will it take that long to get back into a beautiful world? Yeah, maybe. And can we accept that humbly, that we, let's say for the rest of our lives, we're going to be in cultural degeneration? Yeah, fine. But again, cathedral build, think about the bigger picture.
It's a lot to think about, and it's not a question I think we'll answer in our life, but I think the simplest thing we can do... well, I say that, but I say it a pinch of salt, because we might not solve it, but the problem might be solved for us.
Yes.
Who knows? I mean, I joked before that, God only knows and God only will. You know? Yeah. Ultimately, this whole situation, if it gets worse, the whole story says Christ will come back and sort it all out. Happy ever after? Will it restart from the beginning? Who knows? Who knows what's going to happen after Christ comes back? I have no idea. Maybe that's my ignorance speaking. I've done a little bit of research on that, but it seems to be fairly interpretable in different ways. But regardless, the things we can do now are not these grand schemes or grand plots, us trying to resurrect anything or bring back a revolution. The only thing we can do is have conversations and speak truth as much as we can, as much as we believe, and our truth will not always be on the mark, but at least we try it to be as hard as we can.
Absolutely.
And carrying on, at least trying to explore ideas and not holding on to anything too tightly other than God itself, because that's the only thing you can hold on to tightly, and that's the whole point. Is you need to hold on to something tightly, because that gives you the ability to not hold on too tightly to the earthly things.
Yes.
Because if you don't hold tightly onto that, you're going to hold tightly onto something on the earth. Okay, and something on the earth will capture you. The earth itself might capture you. It gives you the freedom to not be attached, ironically. You have to attach yourself to that to not be attached to anything else. But I think in terms of Christianity and the different layers of connection to God itself, how certain human figures can be in the way of that. For example, the Pope. It's no surprise popes of the past have been corrupted. I mean, you have all that power. You have at least people looking at you as a divine authority, you know, and it's very tricky to find the balance and be humble enough as a spiritual leader to not inflate your ego with that very spiritual admiration and believe that you yourself are kind of a god. It's very hard to not fill yourself with pride, and that's why only the very special, holiest of the holy ones who can still maintain submission and not be full of pride in that position. It's not an easy balance to play. No. But also, I think as soon as we start looking at a spiritual individual like that and believe that he is to be the only one who can convey the spiritual truths to us through God, it detaches themselves from God. And ultimately, this is what orthodoxy has, I think, in abundance, is the true leader of the church is simply Christ. There is no arch figure who is to be looked up to and to be listened to as if they have all the knowledge and all the understanding. It's like Christ is of course he is. You know, who else to lead the church other than the true King of Kings?
Yes,
it makes sense. And the problem is, if you restrict people from finding the Spirit, then all they are left with is the shells of the dogmatic side. And dogma is half of what religion is. The other half is spiritual, true, pure spirituality. And when the two come together, that's understanding.
Yes.
But it seems to be at the moment there's a lot of dogma, but not a lot of true magic. People find people know. You tell them, you preach to a lot of people Christianity, and they will hear is the same old things, the same old dogmas. And what good is that dogma if they themselves don't feel the magic? It's like you've got to connect people to the magic. People aren't going to care. That's their emotions. That's their passions.
Yeah.
The passion of Christ must be felt, not just, oh, look, he's Christ, love him. Christ is King. It's like, what are you trying to do? They're just going to believe. You say it enough times, you're going to suddenly be like, oh, fair enough.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Then it's just.
That's the one thing I think we can do is how do we as modern intellectuals bring back almost an awareness of almost connecting to this in a way people can actually feel it.
Yeah, like you described, it's like that form of Christianity, for example, people that have that worldview of, if I proclaim Christ, that means I am a Christian. It's like, yeah, okay, to a certain extent, that it is mentioned in the Bible to a certain extent, but the point is, it's the embodiment factor. It's not enough for you to proclaim. You need to do it through your actions, through who you are as a human being, through your heart, through your soul, as you mentioned. So I think because Christianity is a big religion. And as you know, Protestantism, for example, has about 40,000 denominations. So that's already enough division. That's part of the problem, you see, when you're blurring the unity. That's part of the modern problem. We can talk about progressive ideology blurring in terms of so much distinction actually blurs what the truth is. The same with ironically Protestantism to a certain extent. It's like so many denominations. What is the unifying factor? So then you go to the other apostolic churches. You've got Catholicism, Oriental Orthodoxy. With Orthodoxy, the thing what they've conserved, and that's why there's never been a major schism in Eastern Orthodoxy, is because they still conserve this symbolic representation of what it means in terms of the church. And the church is a representation of what the cosmos is. It's like a microcosm, and then the universe is like the heavens. It's like the macrocosm, and they kept this rich ritual, and it stayed mystical in a good way, because you need people. Human beings are spiritual creatures. We crave for that spiritual energy, and unfortunately, what Catholicism and then landing into Protestantism became too scholastic. It became too rational. It became too left hemispheric, too sola scriptura. And that was half the truth of what Christianity is. Like you mentioned the dogma, and then you've got the spirit. That's what it is. You need the combination of two. And we have one side of the coin, modernity, in terms of certain spiritual people. They will deny the goods of dogma and just focus on the esoteric nature. But you need an exoteric element. You need boundaries. You need order. That's really important. That's true spirituality. Going back to the caste system, that's the order. You need order, and that's okay. So is there a way to map on the Orthodox structure back into Western Christianity? Maybe that's a long-term project. Maybe there's talks between Catholicism and Orthodoxy, not from a fake way in terms of uniting, once again, but maybe over time they can unite through understanding what are the differences and what can be, for example, the papal infallibility from Vatican I by the Pope. That's probably an extreme claim by the Pope. So obviously Eastern Orthodoxy will say, no, that needs to go away before we can unite, for example. And then these are serious discussions that might help the culture long term. And again, this is not something we will see the fruits anytime soon. But I guess if we can map on that kind of structure into Catholicism, that could be a win, I guess. But yeah, that people crave spirituality, and I guess if we keep living in this materialistic atheistic paradigm, people will seek wide and far, but you don't want to get lost in the mirage of spiritual ideologies that are out there.
It's true, and actually, I'm seeing definitely an increase in popularity in our countries in Islam, and I think there's various reasons for that. I think it's very appealing to a young men who feel they haven't had anything of a higher nature to believe in, and then Islam is inherently very tilted towards the masculine side, I would say, and at least in a way that is on a surface level. And I think popular figures like Andrew Tate coming out and saying he's a Muslim, obviously it's a lot of the people in the red pill scene who are of that ilk. I'm not going to go into break it down. You know what red pill is. Most people listening know what red pill energy is. And definitely a lot of truth in that zone, but it can be very much, when you say red pill, you're generally going to be black pilled in some way. I'd say it's very easy to sort of become the red pill and the black pill are kind of the same thing now to a certain extent. The whole point of like the red pill was always to sort of be outside of this matrix mind and to see things clearly. But the problem is that very easily can entice you into seeing the world in an extremely cynical way, where you end up resenting all girls because, well, our modernity has corrupted a lot of girls, and it's easy to sort of not love them and to sort of see them as non-human and to have a lot of hate. And it can be a very resentful road, I think, the red pill road. And the enticement, and obviously how strict the relationship between man and woman is in Islam, is extremely, extremely conservative, and obviously as modernity has progressed, we've moved a long way from that, too far away from that. But that's still, that image I still is not at one with the with Christianity. It's almost too extreme for most.
Yes.
Extreme for most, but but people look at it and think, you know what, that's better than what we're seeing right now.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
Islam is a very strong religion, and I do think it's going to be, especially now we're seeing Muslim populations start to grow and grow and grow in England, and of course I respect Muslims, and Muslims respect Christianity. And I think we were saying before how it seems to be now that it's almost the enemy of our enemy is our friend. So a lot of us are working together, which is really nice to see. But it seems to be that a lot of people who haven't really pondered much, I want to be religious or I want to believe in something, on a surface level they'll just see Islam and what the Christians got to show about. It's like, well, it's a common vision that our Christians are too nice, they're too weak. We have this sense of weakness. They don't stand up for themselves. They allow themselves to get walked over. We've seen this all the time now. And it was only until recently that that the Orthodox priest in Australia was stabbed by a Muslim, but that I'm not saying that he speaks for all Muslims by any means, but he was. It only took that for them to start to stand up for their faith and say enough is enough. But what do you think about that connotation of looking at Christians?
I think it's
weak.
Yeah, I think this is all tainted by the lens of modernity. Even people picking religion like it's candy. You don't pick religion like it's candy.
Yeah.
What Carl Jung warned Western man is to seek East in terms of seeking for Eastern religions, which was obviously he was talking about Buddhism, Taoism, Hinduism, but even Islam. Islam is not the religion of Europe. The majority of Europe has been Christianity for over 1,000 years. And I think Western man needs to honor that heritage, needs to be truthful with that heritage, and needs to see the beauty of that heritage, the grandeur.
Well, it's in our blood. It's in our blood.
Yeah. And it's so that for me personally, as someone who's of Portuguese background, I wouldn't be here without a reconquista. That's what you call it, reconquista, in terms of Portuguese and Spanish people getting back the lands and forming the kingdoms. I wouldn't be here, and that's through Christian. Talking about just war, which is an interesting topic, actually, very tricky topic to navigate. But that's part of just war theory. The lands were taken initially from the Islamic expansion, and then through history, Portugal and Spain start taking back the lands, and then they got their lands back. And this is a very tricky topic as a Christian, because there is power. There's this Andrew Tate phenomena in terms of it's weak to turn the other cheek. He's talking rubbish because he doesn't understand the spiritual principle of embodying that fact. Christianity was built on the martyrs that turned the other cheek, built on that power, that paradox of the weakest becoming the strongest. Christianity, Jesus Christ's crucifixion, we proclaim the cross for a reason, not because it's just a random symbol, but the ultimate paradox of what that symbol provides. At his weakest, he became the highest. The sacrificial lamb became the roaring lion.
Yeah.
And that spread through the apostles. The martyrdom of the apostles, they didn't fight with swords. They proclaimed the gospel and then were martyred. And that's how that religion really spread, Christianity, because there's truth in that paradigm in terms of embodying that worldview. And so now going back to the just war element, this for me is a very tricky topic, because this is why modern ideologies, when I talk about modern ideologies, I'm actually talking as well about nationalism, for example. The idea of nationalism, people say that's conservative. For me, as a more traditionalist, I don't you can throw that in a bin. Nationalism it's not enough to save the West. You can't be waving the flags of Europe. That doesn't matter. There has to be a deeper spiritual underbelly to resurrect the West. And these flags are not, nationalism is not enough. It creates more division. It's more reactionary, and it's not actually based on Christ. So it's difficult. It's a really difficult topic, to be honest with you, George. It really is. And obviously, it seems like we're trying to work in terms of not solutions, but more diagnosis, like in terms of the problems that are going on, and in terms of what can Western man do,
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it, when we talk about culture being built into our DNA, and actually this kind of speaks a lot to Jung's collective unconscious, how our ancestors' wisdom is almost in our DNA, and at the time people thought it was a crackpot. people still do. But
Yes.
the more science unravels about our biological reality, the more we can actually see that with epigenetics, how actual choices and experiences may actually be able to transfer themselves into DNA. Not just through a completely classical vision of evolution, but there's like another layer of how you can activate DNA, which affects which genes are passed on by epigenetics. It's fascinating.
Absolutely.
How almost. This is kind of rescuing your dead father. Is like you can switch on different parts of yourself through going out and testing you're almost like opening yourself up, building on yourself, finding new parts of your unconscious, switching them on, integrating them, and that could have something linked to epigenetics and in terms of what your offspring is going to be. It's a crazy thought, but having this idea of the world soul, it only makes sense that the taste of Islam is going to be far too harsh for the Western man. We are not. You're not Islamic people, and they are, and fair enough. But we are Christians,
absolutely.
And if we are to be true to ourselves, the evolution has evolved along a Christian narrative. So our very DNA, it is much more of a Christian style. So Christianity is the one which suits us.
Absolutely.
To deviate from that is to betray ourselves.
Absolutely.
And I think I think that's why it's one of the horriblest things to sort of deny people the ability to sort of believe and to sort of completely dominate a culture. It's to sort of cut the spiritual root out of it, where that whole DNA, that whole pool is. That's why we look at the Nazis and look at the Holocaust as such a disgusting thing, because it's not just killing the people, but it's trying to kill the very spirit of those people.
Yes,
by
absolutely.
eradicating the Jewish spirit from the timeline. That's why people are so triggered by that, because it's not just genocide of people, it's genocide of spirit. Because if you can truly rip out the spirit, you've killed that whole collective imagination. You haven't just killed one person, you've killed a whole dream pool. And I think people sense there's a collective soul. Like, this is why how they react to something, it's almost like their soul knows it. But as soon as rationality comes into it, they're like, no, I don't trust that part of my intuition. It's like there's always some truth to it. And it's a funny thing. But back onto what you were saying with Christianity, okay? And there's a few different people who have talked about Christianity being almost... People have compared it to... Funnily enough, and this is playing devil's advocate, a lot of people have compared it to the modern woke movement, and in a way. Because obviously this... And I believe falsely, just to clarify.
Yes.
But there is similarities in it, because, you see, okay, well, what do Christians do? They, we don't naturally embrace in battle, but we will turn the cheek, essentially, and there's power in that. And then you could see the modern woke movement. They don't actually engage in anything of an active pursuit, but they'll always cower and always ask for attention and ask for them to, look at us, we've got it so hard. Look at our struggle. Look at our we're the real martyrs. Look at us in this horrible world. People have made these connections to almost like the woke movement and how Christianity was to the Roman Empire, right? It's the Nietzschean philosopher Uber Boyo on Twitter. He's a good guy. I've known him on and off, chatting to him a long time. I remember when we were involved in John Peterson group, but he talks a lot more about Jung now, actually, and obviously he's an evolving person. His thoughts are always evolving, as we all are. But he very much made this comparison, and it was very hard to debate with. I didn't engage in debating it, but I did make the distinction that there is a lot more to Christ in its depth and what that truly means. But a lot of people do make distinctions, and it's an interesting one. And how do we, please?
It's interesting on the surface, but this is what I'm saying about the modern age. The modern age is tainted through, because we live in 2024. So how we view things is through the lens of living in this paradigm. And this is why I get, this is slightly off topic, but still related to what you're saying. When people, talk about the horrors of the past, it's like, you've got no idea how the world was 1,000 years ago. You have no idea how the world was 2,000 years ago. The brutality, the suffering, the pain, the depths of what humanity went through. You have no idea. We live in an incredibly comfortable material world. And what that happens is, when we live in a comfortable material world, we don't have the spiritual capacity to understand what is truth. We don't have that capacity anymore. We're so because we're too comfortable.
Comparison. You've got no comparison.
No.
It's like if I was in a war zone, I would know truth by seeing it in my face. Like, it's a good thing to try to help this man with his pain. But we don't have these confrontations anymore, do we?
But even that's why,
very rarely and very few.
Yeah, no, you're right. So even going back to what you mentioned about the woke movement, it's like, well, don't forget the woke movement is based on attachment, ideological possession. It's based on superficial things, and it's about actually they just want to be validated. The depths of what Christianity is,
whole different story.
It's a complete deny yourself, and you'll find yourself.
It's actually, when you look at it like that, it's actually such a pathetic comparison.
There's no comparison.
Because, you know, it's almost like the woke almost making a mockery. They're trying to be like, they're pretending like they are Christians almost like the day. Oh, look at our struggle. And actually, when you compare it to the true struggle, what people lived thousands of years ago, it's like, okay, that's bravery.
Yes.
These guys, pathetic.
Yes, but that's the paradox of what Christ was trying to say. You deny yourself, you will find yourself. You know, carry your cross, and even if you've heard of René Girard in his book "I See Satan Fall Like Lightning," he talks about, initially there's a initial bit before the actual book begins, and it talks about how the modern ideologies of today's age, it's just the satanic principle being warped. You know, Satan, all it does, it just wants to create conflict every single time, and now the idea of the satanic principle, it's taken charge of even the idea of being a victim. You know. The idea of being victim has been manipulated and warped. And that's why we have this idea called virtue signaling and all these type of words. Yeah, because it's not truth. This is just manipulate. This is not the truth. And the satanic principle will always bend what is true, you know. So I think truth wins at the end. Going back to the grand narrative, it does win at the end. But, you know, how does it manifest? We do not know.
I think it manifests by the people who should be standing up don't usually stand up until things get bad enough. And when things get bad enough and the tricks keep getting worse and worse and worse, the good, powerful people finally say enough's enough, and that's when good finally wins. Because the thing is with bad people, they'll react and they'll do things for no reason. They'll cause trickery, they'll cause carnage, they will be violent out of no good reason. Good people don't do anything like that unless there's a real good reason. And that's why it takes so goddamn long for people to actually act who are good against evil. It's because it's got to be legitimately bad before you drive good people to doing these things, and I think that's part of the reason how and why it manifests.
Yeah, and that's going back to, in terms of individually, you know, you go through a spiritual crisis, you know, the dark night of the soul. These ideas, it's like you go down to the lowest depths, and until then, your whole worldview is shaken. And from that point, you need to wake up and be like, okay, this is too low. I need to sort my life out. And that's on an individual level. But sometimes the collective needs, it's harsh to say, but it needs some sort of collective pain. I'm not saying physically collective pain, but some sort of realization where culturally this is not a good paradigm to be operating. This is not a healthy paradigm to be living and fulfilling one's human soul. And these are the things that we need to realize. But again, if you see these questions like Christianity as weak, you do have to, even if you're not Christian, you know, Buddhism, there's certain parallels. You have to see these legacy religions as offering deep truths. You know, they offer deep truths for a reason. So the idea of the woke movement, on a superficial level, fine, but that's all it is. On the deepest analysis, it's a rubbish analysis, to be honest. But Uber Boya is a G, anyways. I like Uber Boya. That's what I have to say.
He's a G. He's a G.
Yeah, I like him.
No offense, we just don't like the analogy too much, bro. I get what you're getting at there. Yeah. So that might bring us on nicely to seeing how these great collective forms of communication and Neuralink are potentially going to affect us going into the future now. Because if we look at this all connected matrix, we sort of look at this demiurgical kind of vision. We are becoming more connected, obviously, but how intimate and deep will this connection between us go? I mean, is there a time when all of us, as you said, telepathy, we'll have no choice, but right now I could connect and I'd have to see your thoughts and you had to see mine, and there was rules put in place. There's no secrets from anyone. We're all connected as nodes, and if you want to be a good person in society, there's no secrets, because truth is good, right? Like, truth, you got to tell the truth. So why can't I just see into your mind? What's the utility of not seeing everything? Because if I can see into your mind, then we're telling the truth to each other. But also, is there no utility in holding back and not saying what you really think, or saying things in certain ways?
Yes.
So it seems to me that the potential for an interconnected web, where we all are in this great box as a singularity, and we're just, as individual batteries, as nodes, milked for our energy, out of our own control. Our free choice has been taken away from us now, and we are simply being We are literally nodes in part of the matrix powering this great machine. Everyone is powering it as a battery. It's a horrible thought. And if we don't get the node, we can't buy and sell. We can't exchange with other nodes.
Yes.
Because we haven't taken the mark.
Yes.
We haven't taken the mark. We haven't taken the implant. If you don't want to be part of our system, you're not being involved, I'm afraid. You're not accessing the markets. You're not going to be able to buy any food. You're going to be put where all the other non-marked people go. Virtual gulag, burn. I don't know what they're going to do to us.
Yeah, no,
probably
it
some
is
sort of
crazy.
Virtual gulag.
It's crazy.
Some sort of
It's
virtual
crazy.
gulag. I don't know. They'll just force it in us and make us be in a room repeating everything over and over again. Something horrible like that.
I think here's a devil's advocate though regarding that dystopian scenario. If that world is ushered, for example, and thoughts can be read, ultimately truth has to prevail. Even in that world, truth has to prevail. There has to be light in the darkness in that world, because again, there's only so long a civilization can live under lies. And so if thoughts are being read, like at the end, we need to understand what are the most, in terms of the thoughts that arise. There could be thoughts that are more true and more false, and they will appear more apparent as that type of civilization arises. And I know that's a bit more wacky. It's dystopian. It's not great. But if that's the outcome, if the transhumanists get their way and we're living in this wacky dystopian world, truth should prevail. That's the idea of, now bring it back to Christianity. The idea of Christ redeems matter. He redeems everything at the end. He has to redeem. That's part of the eschatology, the end story. That's part of the paradigm. And that's the idea of even, the story of Abel and Cain and Abel. And the line of Cain is the line of the arts, for example. The arts get redeemed through iconography. Through the story of, obviously, Jesus Christ, the icon. And you see in the Orthodox churches, the icons get redeemed through art. But initially it was seen as an evil, because art can be weaponized as propaganda, of course. So I'm not necessarily saying, this transhumanist world will end up being the most beautiful, utopian world. I'm definitely not saying that. But what I'm saying is anything could get redeemed if truth can prevail, So that's probably a thought.
It's a thought, and realistically, I can never imagine a world of pure darkness. And I think it says, Mark of the Beast will come and Christians' heads will roll. So whether the only way out is through death of us, or whether the only way out is we can somehow blend into this great machine and survive without being part of it. This is it. Obviously, we're thinking if this is going to be the reality we're thinking of, obviously we have to take it with a pinch of salt. Or maybe the only way to be saved is this: when it reaches peak darkness, that's when Christ will finally return. When it's darkest of the dark, then we see a return. Yeah.
And then people talk about the on another side of the story, it's, well, maybe we're going to live in a new age paradise anyways, and then it's like the Luciferian pattern, the idea of Lucifer.
Well, and I honestly think that the Antichrist, when he comes, will be of this kind of thinking. He will present to you a utopian vision. Of course he will. He has to capture enough people's imagination and support. And actually, people will be desperate at some point very soon, and they already are, but it's only going to increase this desperation for a brighter future. We're already seeing the World Economic Forum get their filthy paws into everything, trying to create utopian visions, and you could say they generally are trying their best to do what's good for humanity, obviously at the same time still giving themselves massive ego boosts of heroic visions of grandeur of how they're going to save the world. It seems to me that there will eventually be, call him the Antichrist or not, a great charismatic leader coming along who has deep spiritual inclinations, but he speaks in a way that people don't laugh at his spiritual inclinations. They say, this is true. He's speaking to me. He's speaking to how I feel. He's like my lightning rod to my thoughts.
Yes.
There will be a point a leader like this comes along. It's inevitable. People are already waiting. Even normal people don't think about this. They already say, I can see a new leader, a new Hitler, a new Stalin, and something even on a higher level. It's about time history had a truly epic figure, for good or bad, come along. We're due of an epic figure. We haven't had one for a while. A new Hitler of this generation, not this generation, of this millennium potentially. Even though they go far to say. And when he comes, he will deceive many, and I think people will want to be deceived because he fills them with so much hope, and that's how people will be got.
That's how suck people in. Exactly, and that's how people with spiritual discernment need to watch out for these other patterns that could occur.
Exactly, because they may have a lot of people with spiritual discernment. They may have unlocked the libido. They may have unlocked the life force. They're connected to everything, and they've unlocked the spiritual vision way to look around now, and they can get feelings of how things connect, and it's very powerful. But they haven't all got any direction or grounding in this yet. So all it takes is one leader. They've had that dark night of the soul. They've opened themselves up. All of a sudden, he sucks that in. He directs them and says, "Oh wow, you now understand. Yes, look at this. Look at this." Yeah. He distracts that life force. He traps that life force in a box because that hasn't found any grounding yet.
Yes.
He gets them, sucks them in, traps them in his box. Welcome to my matrix.
Yeah, no, that's game over, George. Game over.
Welcome to my matrix, boys.
That's
it's
it.
My box
I'm out.
now.
I'm out, George. I'm out.
Okay. Look, I think maybe that's a good place to wrap it up, Philippe, to be honest with you. I can see Colin saying 10 minutes remaining about 5 minutes ago, so maybe we'll wrap it up. But Philippe, look, really, really good chat today. Always have fun talking to you. I love the
Definitely,
energy.
George.
It's always
Definitely.
really nice energy, and both
Appreciate it,
passionate.
George.
I think we're both aligned
it,
as well with the. And that's the good thing about philosophical Rambler is people have nuanced different takes and different perspectives and different areas of what they like to read, but ultimately there's always that one thing bringing us all together, and it's the spirit, and I think that's always a nice thing to see. So yeah, Philippe, thank you very much. And,
thank you, George.
I'd love to do another one
definitely.
with you very
100%.
soon. All right.
Yeah, 100%.
Nice one. Thank you.
Thank you.